Everybody, it's Richard Harris and Scott Lees for a very special episode of the Surf and Sales podcast, where we're going to address mental health in a very unique way. And we're excited to have our guest with us. First, a quick shout out to our sponsors, Lead 411, Wingman, and Vidyard, and then the Salesforce Revenue Cloud, which leads us to our guest, Marin?
Almost. Third one, Marin.
Marin. I even tried to write it down and I blew it.
Okay.
So Marin Nelson, at least I got that part right,
Yeah.
who is the Regional VP of Enterprise at Salesforce. And the reason she's joining us is today she's helped create, and I'm going to let her tell the story of Soberforce, where Salesforce is really trying to help their employees who are struggling and having challenges with, I'm assuming it's addiction, but maybe it could be other things around supporting mental health, which I know they already support. So why don't you tell everybody what Soberforce is, how it got
Awesome.
to the...
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is very exciting. Nice to meet both of you. So a group of sober leaders and I found each other on LinkedIn, actually, not within the walls of Salesforce, but on another platform. When a colleague of mine, Chris Anthony, posted about his recovery in a public way last year. Another guy, Andy, who's also a sales leader at Salesforce, found it, liked it. He posted about his own, and I saw Randy's post, and I commented, "Oh, me too. I've been sober for 15 years. I'm also a Salesforce leader. It's so great to meet you. We're a big company, as you know. So I don't know all the sales leaders. And I actually had never met anyone else who was sober at my company. And so it was pretty exciting to see people posting it publicly and getting connected. So we got together and had a phone call, and there's 4 of us who are all sales leaders, and said, this is really nice to connect with other sober people at Salesforce, especially in this weird COVID world we live in where everyone's a face on a screen. And how can we keep this going just as a connection point for us? And if there's 4 of us, I bet you in a big company, there's a whole bunch more. So maybe we can expand this.
Yeah, I have a question. When you work at, and I think I don't care what size company, but particularly the company like Salesforce, and you're 15 years into being sober, so it could be different, I think, depending. Do you ever worry like, oh my God, I hope nobody ever finds out that I go to meetings or I need to do this discreetly, like, even shouldering more of a burden? And I'm making a huge assumption, so push back on me, but is that what it felt like for a while?
In the beginning of my recovery, before I was at Salesforce actually, and I lived in New York City, and I worked in commercial real estate. I was a commercial real estate broker. I was a little bit more close to the vest about it, although the people who were close to me knew I didn't drink. And that's for me how I've guaranteed my sobriety in the workplace in my early days of recovery, was to be public about it with my boss. Now that's a super personal choice, right? So some people really want to maintain their anonymity at work. They don't want that to be a known fact about them. For me, it's part of my staying sober. It's part of just how I operate. I am who I am everywhere. And I think it's a big part of how I've stayed sober these years. But I have no judgment on people who keep it personal. So for me, that's not my story. For some of my co-founders of Soberforce, that is their story. And it was a bold move to go public with it. But I will say, going public in the way we have with creating this group did take bravery and courage, because I was posting out to my entire company. Whoever wanted to see it on Chatter can now see it, that I've been sober for 15 years, and a little bit about my hitting bottom and why creating this community was so important to me. And that even with the 15 years, there is stigma on addiction and alcoholism. And even though I've been in recovery from it for 15 years, yeah, of course, it's a little bit nerve-wracking as a leader to say, I have this thing called alcoholism, and also I am sober, right? And but that's the point of it. Is the point is to say, you can, if you're struggling, get help. There are those who have gone on this path, who are on this path, and you're not alone, and you don't need to feel alone in the workplace, and there are people you can connect with. And that's a big part of why we created what is Soberforce, which is an affinity group at Salesforce, which is a place for people to be in community together who are either sober themselves or curious about getting sober or struggling with other addictions, is what it's expanded to. Or even just interested, how do I host a sober event or a non-drinking event for my customers, because I'm sick of having wine tastings and I want to do something different. So our goal is to create a community for all of that.
I want to ask you a question about the alone aspect that you just mentioned. I mean, does it, how do I phrase this? Do the numbers kind of hold true? Like if X number of people, you know, in America or in society have addiction issues, it's the same inside a company like Salesforce, and we have the numbers to kind of prove it. And then does that math hold true across departments? Because it seems to me that folks in the sales org have a much higher propensity for these kind of issues.
I mean, we do share kind of crazy when you go into sales. There is a kind of crazy that we must all share together. And I say that with being one of those people who identifies that way.
With peace and love. We say it
with
peace and love.
100%. Yes, I am in that category as a lifelong salesperson. It's a great question. I don't have the data. I know statistically about 12% of people are impacted by addiction. I imagine, given my own just experiences, and this is just by observation of being sober for as long as I have been, that we are everywhere. We are in the C-suite. We are in the unemployment. We are in the, you know, it's like, it doesn't matter what race, religion, gender, sexual orientation you are, addiction doesn't care. So are there more people in sales who are addicts and alcoholics? Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I couldn't back that with any sort of data. I'm sure there is a study out there somewhere, but
it would be interesting to look at research on that. I'm
it
like,
would be surprising. Yeah.
super curious. I mean, I and you perhaps, I mean, maybe we're biased just because we've been inside sales orgs our whole life. So that's primarily what we see. And if I talk to my brother who's been in engineering departments, he might tell me, oh, you're crazy. It's engineering is by far the, you know, the worst. But what about the stigma? And you mentioned they're in the C-suite. Like, is it harder to overcome the stigma for people who are more junior in their career or people who are more senior in their career?
It's a really good question. I think for me, part of my being willing to be very out about my recovery is because I've been sober for 15 years and I'm not counting days and I'm not 1 year in. I think it's also part of it is because I am in leadership that I feel a bit more protected, maybe to say, and a bit, maybe it's because I have more self-confidence at this stage in my career and my age and more willing to be truly authentically me wherever I am, which I did not have in my 20s, right?
Yeah, it's hard to know if that comes just because of the experience, or like you said, maybe you're a little more safeguarded. You're like, oh, I've got a more established career, so they can't.
I've proven myself more. I'm not brand new.
I get a little longer rope. They'll be more tolerant and patient with me. That's what I'm kind of getting at. It's like, I think people struggle with that, maybe who are junior in their career, and then people who are senior in their career might be thinking, oh, for God's sake, if I let people know, like, I'm fucked. Like,
I think it's all of it. I think it's all of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, you know, again, it's like the Soberforce creation is basically Salesforce gives us a platform with Chatter. It gives all of our customers a platform with Chatter, which is what's super exciting to me too, because I hope this doesn't just stay in the walls of Salesforce. I hope that our customers see it and go, you know what, we need to have a conversation about this too, right? What does it look like if we facilitate this conversation? And I hope that we can demonstrate, and I don't speak for Salesforce, I speak for myself and my own hopes of this group, but I hope that we can show other companies how to have this conversation in the workplace, because it's not something that I've ever experienced being talked about in the workplace, right? And that's why it was for leaders who have long-term sobriety who started this, to try to say, to your point, to the people who are counting days or the people who have more seniority but have never disclosed it, like, create a safe place where it's okay to say it and we can be together in community.
I think it's great. It's interesting to me. Couple of thoughts. Well, I'm going to stick with one. So, you know, what do you do when your team is under, you know, the age of 30, right? Like, you know, you think sales, right? Obviously, you're an RVP, you've worked your way up, but you have people who've been in sales. Maybe your team is more mature because you're on the enterprise side, right? But what do you do with those people? What advice would you give them about their sobriety as it relates to work and trying to share? Like, if you went back 14 years ago, or maybe even 16 years ago, when you were so nervous about it. What kind of advice would you give, that Marin?
I think that, and thank you, you said it right. I think that it's so personal. So it's not for me to ever say to someone maybe I'm not hearing your question right, but the way I hear it is, if someone's newly sober and they are seeking community and they're trying to figure out, like, and this has come up in the creation of Soberforce, people ping us, we put our cell phones out there. What do I do? There's a wine tasting tonight. Do I not go? Do I risk not getting to meet this CMO that's going to be there? But I feel nervous and I'm scared I'm going to drink if I go. My advice, and it's putting on the hat of someone who's sober, not putting on a hat of a leader or, and I feel confident Salesforce would support me in this advice. My advice to that person is, you do what keeps you safe and healthy first and foremost. And if you do that, then the career follows. If you are an alcoholic or an addict and you drink, I guarantee, as would be my experience, everything I've worked for goes out the window. My career, my family, my friends, the trust I've built, the who I am, that all goes away if I drink. And so if it's someone coming to me for advice who is seeking to be sober and stay sober, that has to come before any other preconceived notion of what they owe for their job. Because you're not going to have a job, you're not going to show up for your job if you're drinking, right? And it's not safe for you to drink. But as far as disclosing it or what they tell their boss or not, that's so personal, right? And everyone's got to make the call that feels right to them and their own integrity and where they feel safe.
And some of that safety has to be like, what is their relationship with their boss?
100%.
Who that boss is, right?
Yeah, because maybe their boss struggles with drinking too much, and maybe it wouldn't be safe, right? And everyone's got to pick what works for them. But I hope that in demonstrating authenticity and being human, that we say to other people, it's safe for you to be human in the workplace too. That's ultimately what I hope.
When you guys first announced it, did the floodgates open, or was it still a trickle of like, oh, thank God someone said something? I've been holding on to this for so long.
It's been pretty remarkable, and it's been super humbling. It literally within 30 seconds of my hitting post of my story. So we turned Soberforce on. I mean, really kind of like, we're rolling with it. This is all very iterative. It just launched right before Thanksgiving. We said, we got to get this out for the holidays. And if we said to each other, if we help one person, then we've been successful. If we help one person, which is one family, we've been successful in this. And 30 seconds after posting, a guy I used to work with pinged me on my cell phone and said, I just saw your post. I'm 10 days sober. I'm so happy you posted that. I remembered you not drinking at a customer dinner years ago, and I didn't know what your story was, and I didn't want to assume, but I'm new to this and I kind of don't know what to do. And that conversation would have never happened had I not posted. And I felt like sick to my stomach before I posted because I was so nervous about exposing myself on such a big stage. And immediately was reassured by the universe, like that was the right call, because you just helped someone who now is still sober and very active in our Soberforce community. And it just makes me so happy, because we would have not had that connection had I not posted that and had this group not gone live. So we have almost 200 members now in a span of 6 weeks of going live, which is pretty remarkable. And we've had our kickoff call. We're starting to explore ways we can have intersectionality conversations with our equality groups like Boldforce and Windforce and Salesforce Women's Network. So the support has been incredible. It genuinely makes me so happy to work at Salesforce and in a community where this is celebrated. And I just, the people who have long-term sobriety who are like, oh, I've always hoped for a group like this and I'm so happy. People who are sober curious and just attending calls but not really talking yet, which is why we're here. It's, we're here, it's public and public to the Salesforce community. And, the hope is that people find others to connect with or see a name and go, oh, I worked with that person. Maybe I could call them for a one-on-one conversation.
Sort of as you built this internally, and I know, I don't know if everybody knows this, I know that when Benioff created Salesforce, he immediately created the 111 plan, right? Where you give 1% back in your time. And so every new employee actually gives 1% of their time to whatever, I don't know, I think it's their own cause, if I'm not mistaken. but you give 1% of revenue and then you give away the software at 1%.
Mhm.
So it's built into the DNA from day one.
Yeah.
Was it hard to get HR on board? And
No.
that's sort of the first question. The second
I
question is,
know. I would have thought, no, we had a call and they were like, yes, thank you. And, someone shared their own story with mental health struggles on that call. And again, I was like, that would have never happened had we not said, hey, we're here and here are our struggles and here's our authentic story. And someone else said, yeah, here's my authentic story. I mean, addiction's everywhere. People, if someone themselves doesn't struggle with it, they probably have a friend or a family member, right? And so our goal is like, let's take the stigma away. Let's just of all the things, right?
would you maybe someone's listening and they have no idea what the culture is, right? Or maybe it's, the culture is, of course, we support everybody verbally.
Yeah.
How would one, and I think it takes the right person, and clearly you were, it couldn't be done, I don't think, by someone who's 10 days in. How would you advise someone to try to take an idea like this even to the company?
Yeah, I mean, I think I love that you're right. Salesforce, it's in our culture. There are other equality groups that are running and successful and celebrated. And so we had a framework to follow to become this affinity group. For a new company, I'd say, of course you have to read the culture. And if you feel like it's a culture where, your bravery will be celebrated. And I'd say, the reality is using the statistics of 12% of people are impacted by addiction. And I want to create a community where people feel safe bringing their whole selves to work, because I can tell you, for me, this just even furthers my commitment to Salesforce and my joy at working somewhere where I can be my full self and be celebrated for things that maybe don't look shiny.
Yeah.
Like,
and so it might not sound very sexy to say, but like in a way, this type of program is a massive retention tool for
yeah.
the employees.
Yes. And oh, by the way, productive employees. Because
Yeah.
if you have someone who's actually seeking help for a challenge, not only are you retaining them, because we're pretty good workers, alcoholics, when we're sober. When we're not sober, it's not so good. But, you can help someone. So fundamentally, it's about helping people save their lives, quite literally, right? By saying you're not alone and we're here if you want to talk and if you want help.
Now,
but yeah, I mean, but yes, you will also get someone who is very committed to your company, I would guess, right?
Yeah.
If you say it's safe for you to be here and to have this conversation here.
Now, it's interesting to me because it's like, this is kind of one of those programs and groups that you're in that you actually don't want to grow, right? Because you prefer less people have these kind of problems. But then again, there's probably more people who have issues who are not in it. So you want them to come into the fold. So it makes me just think, as like a community builder, like, how the fuck do I navigate that? Because like, I don't, you know what I mean? I want more people.
I don't think we're going to make people alcoholic by having Soberforce. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think that we probably already exist in vast numbers, and there's quite a few of us who are already sober. And I think, COVID.
The goal then does become like, we need to grow the group.
Yes.
From a community building standpoint, it's like, you're not thinking about anything, but we need to grow the group because the people are already out there.
100%. It's allyship, right? So it's also, there's a lot of wine tastings happening, and we're not the anti-drinking crew. Let me be super clear on that. My husband's a normal drinker. I'm surrounded by normal drinkers. It is not a statement on the drinking institution, but it is a request and a hope that maybe there's a pause before scheduling another whiskey tasting to say, is this event inclusive to all of our customers? Is this event safe for all of our employees? Is there something we could do, like a cooking class that's just as fun, but doesn't unintentionally leave someone out? So our membership is a lot.
I wonder if you promote it as, this is specifically a non-alcoholic event, like to your customers, like I would be curious to see what might happen, right?
But does the engagement and attendance of said event go up, down, or stay the same?
Yeah, and we're not advertising. So the things that have happened have been super creative, which has been really fun. So we've done a crowdsourcing on like, hey, let's like, what are some non-drinking events we could host, right? Let's switch it up. Have been super well attended. And we're not advertising them as non-drinking events, but it's a pizza making class, or it's with a chef, like a famous chef, and they're sending you supplies ahead of time, or cookie making, or a graffiti party someone had. Like, oh, I didn't hear
Oh,
Richard. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I want to get in on the cookie making class.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think, yeah.
I
So
have another question, particularly big organizations, and let's pretend 2020 didn't quite happen the way it did, right? And I think it's different for everybody. Dreamforce comes along, and man, that thing can be a booze fest, right? Like
Yeah.
it is crazy. And I've been to, I think, 6 of them now, 7 of them, and that's got to be hard too, right? And I think it goes back to your point earlier, like you take care of you first.
100%. I have, yeah.
How did you, just out of curiosity, because you're at a certain level in your sobriety, did it really not affect you, or did you still have to be super conscious of this, of like, okay, I'm only going to stay out till this amount of time, or I'm only going to meet my customers here? Like,
Yeah.
as an individual, how did you navigate that?
So for me, I stay in the middle of the herd always. So I'm very active in an outside group for my sobriety, and I still am. And it's not because I want to drink today. In fact, the desire to drink left pretty quick when I got sober, but because my sobriety is about living in a solution, and it's about how I live my life. So first and foremost, it's not like I put down drink 15 years ago and I'm good and I go on my merry way. Like, no, I stay sober by being very active in a sober community is how I maintain my sobriety. So it is a check-in before I go to an event like Dreamforce with my sober group of friends to say, this is where I'm going, and I'm going to check in with you, because yeah, you're right. Any social event like that, any conference, there's going to be drinking. Drinking is a big part of our culture. So how I keep myself safe there is knowing where I can find other sober people when I go to events like that. It's also not going to wine tastings. I skip the wine tours. I don't go. I find other ways to connect with my customers at the dinner, right? And when they all go out bar hopping after, I don't go. And it was harder earlier in my career, because to the question earlier Scott had, I did have a concern. Am I gonna not advance my career if I don't go to this thing, right? Am I gonna miss out on the intel from the customer if I'm not with him till the wee hours? But it just isn't worth it. My sanity and my sobriety is not worth it. And it turns out it hasn't hurt my career. I've advanced just fine. And so I hope other people who are early in recovery, or even not, have the confidence to know, like, your worth is far greater than how late you stay out at a customer event, because they're probably not going to remember much of it anyway.
If Dreamforce could do a Soberforce location, right?
Thank you, Richard, for that plug, because that's on our list of hopes and dreams for this year.
You should have, like, almost every day you could have a different theme and a different thing, but definitely promote it as a Soberforce thing. Like, because look, if it's 12% and y'all are driving in 100,000 people, like there's enough who would be thrilled with that.
Yeah. That's my hope for it. I think we're definitely gonna create something at Dreamforce. I don't know what it will be, but Soberforce will have a presence absolutely in some form.
Ideas for you. Like, go get some Cirque du Soleil acrobats, and like have some kind of event, and bring them.
Flame throwing, someone's eating fire. I like it.
Yeah, there's actually a bar that was supposed to open up out here. I live in the East Bay, where it's axe throwing. Scott, I don't even know if I told you about it.
No, but we have those here in Austin. I know.
So
exactly.
like literally they teach you how to throw an axe. Now,
like
and that's at a bar. So I don't think
that's scary. That would be safe or sober.
But I think there's a ton of great ideas, and I love the fact that you're doing this. If you don't mind, I'd love to dig into your story a little bit. Like, first and foremost, when did you know you liked sales?
Oh yeah. I come from, so my dad is a commercial real estate. He had his own commercial real estate firm in the Twin Cities, and it's very sales personality. My brother also is in software sales. And so for me, I almost I intentionally didn't go that direction at first because I needed to be different. So I actually started in nonprofit healthcare, planning national conferences for Planned Parenthood and other similar organizations. Totally not what I do today.
How old
Um,
were you when you were doing this? Like what age?
right out of college, 22, in New York
Okay.
City, right out of
So,
college.
so go back further. Were you the athlete who often comes into sales? Were you the
Yes.
hustler as a kid, always selling something? And did
It's
you
in her
No.
blood. It's in her blood too.
not be gender biased, but
Family DNA.
We're a storytelling family. We talk a lot. There's a lot of people talking. Yeah, I've always been, right? We're all our personalities. What do they say? Since the age of 3. So no, I've always been the way that I am. I was an athlete, yes, and I was an individual athlete, which I think is not surprising going into being individual contributor. I was a diver and a gymnast and a golfer. And I got into sales very shortly after doing the nonprofit thing for about 2.5 years. And I said, this cube life is not for me. And I went into commercial real estate in New York City. And it was super fun and I loved it. And then 2008 happened and it crashed. And I said, oh, it's not that great. And I was kind of over living in New York City at that point. I moved back to Minnesota, which is where I'm from, where my family was. And that's when I started getting into software sales. So I worked in the space for 10 years before joining Salesforce, and I've been at Salesforce since.
Richard, you're on mute. Yes, this is the first 2021 time I've been able to say Richard. There was a million occurrences in 2020. This is the first one of 2021.
So I'd like to sort of interweave, like when did drinking start? Where you look, I had a fake ID in high school and all that kind of stuff. And where did that sort of enter into your life?
Yes, I was 14 and it was really non-eventful. It was after a diving practice. I believe it was a Zima. I was like, yes, I have arrived. This is my solution. I was a really anxious kid. Anxiety is part of my story too. I've always had anxiety. I treat it now in a healthy way, but I definitely was, like most alcoholics, self-medicating an anxiety disorder as a kid. So I started drinking at 14. But my story was always where the outsides looked pretty good, including up until when I hit bottom in New York City when I was 24. I had a job, I had a boyfriend, I had my rent paid. So I was really aware that I came from a line of alcoholics. A lot of my family's in recovery. And so I knew it was critical to keep the outside looking pretty tight, even though the inside was a hot mess, like a dumpster fire, like 2020. So my bottom was really, really not exciting. It was me waking up horribly miserable, horribly hungover, and just going, I can't do this anymore. And I called my parents and asked for help and went to a 12-step meeting and have been lucky that I've stayed in the middle of that herd since, and it has worked for me. And I haven't had a drink since then.
That's awesome. You were literally able to stop on that day.
Yeah, but I took my first "Are you an alcoholic?" quiz that Hazelden has. Do you have a drinking problem? Something like that. When I was 18 in college at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I aced. That. It was the only quiz I aced that year. I aced that one.
In college.
Only one. I got a 99.9%. You drink more than 99.9% of the female population. I was like, yes. Wait, no, I don't want an A+ on that. And I remember the moment I promptly shut my laptop and was like, yeah, whatever. I'm in a sorority. I go to a Big Ten school. They just want my money. But it was there. The seed had been planted.
Right. Like Madison's like the University of Arizona.
Thank you. I mean, a little harder to get into, but yeah.
Oh, see what she did there, Richard.
Oh. I know. Scott went to ASU. So
yeah, because ASU
you just made his day.
Yeah, it's a big party school for sure. Great academics, lots of partying. Yeah, I'm really lucky. I am really lucky. I had examples in my family of sobriety and what long-term sobriety looked like and the lives that those people led. And I also had an example of active drinking and what that life looked like. So that saved me a lot of years of misery because I could see at 24, like, I got to pick my path. Either I'm going to be a drinking alcoholic or a sober alcoholic, but there's clearly no middle of the road solution because I was trying to manage it and there was no managing.
Right. Did your family try to intervene before 24?
My sister told me that I reminded her of a family member who is an alcoholic, an active alcoholic, and I was furious. and it was at Christmas. It was about 5 months before I got sober. And that didn't go over well. But I'm very grateful to her. And I've since made amends and thanked her for her having the courage to say that to me, because I did not want to be like that. And I knew that I knew that it was, my hiding wasn't so hidden in that moment. But no, I lived in New York. They lived in Minnesota. I was able to somewhat hold it together when they were around.
If you think about, right, so we either have, well, I suppose we have middle of the road. I don't know the definition, but there's probably people here who are listening who are not alcoholics. Maybe they don't know one, or maybe they do, and they don't know how to bring it up, right? You're not going to go form an intervention, like, how is there a healthy way that you could encourage someone? If I need to go to Scott, say, Scott, man, I'm really worried about you, and I don't want you to get angry. I feel like you're drinking too much. Like, is that what you try to do? And I know there's not one cookie cutter, like there's not one answer.
Good luck trying not to make the person angry, by the way.
So
yeah, I think if someone's not ready to stop,
but that's the fear, right? Like, that's to what you were just saying, is like your sister had to have a lot of courage
and a lot of love for me. She had to love me more than the reaction I was going to give her.
Yeah,
which is what she did.
So what are the things that those of us who want to help somebody, can we do anything? Can we say anything?
I think you absolutely can say something and should say something. I hope in all regards, whether it's you're noticing someone having a mental health crisis or struggling, I have friends who struggle with depression and anxiety and fill in the blank, right? And when I've had those moments of darkness, to have people say, I see you and I love you and I'm worried about you and how can I help you, matters. And I hope that we all do that for each other, whether it's a colleague or it's a family member or a friend, and to release the results of what they may say or do. It's like, I think also for my own peace of mind, I need to know that I said it. And now whether or not they do something about it, that's out of my control. But I can say to the person, I'm worried about you and I love you. And how can I help you?
I want to shift sort of entirely a little bit to the progression of your career, right? You certainly work at one, if not the number one of the most progressive companies when it comes to women, minorities, gender, age. Like, you guys are like probably the one everybody calls to say, how'd you do this? What advice do you give for people? And I don't care if they're, even if it's just the traditional white guy, but what advice do you give to people who want to get promoted? How do you get promoted to get to that RVP level? Like, how do you build your career brand at probably at an organization?
Yeah. So I think it's a few things. I think it's having integrity and in how you deal with other people. And that by no means that I've done it perfectly and I haven't.
How does that manifest itself in your mind in the workforce?
I think it manifests by being honest in your affairs with other people, by treating others with kindness, by not being just short-sighted about something, whether it's for your customer's success or your team's success, right? And again, I have not been perfect. I'm sure there are plenty of people I've worked with who are like, oh, she was a nightmare on that. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, I'm being dramatic, but like, I'm by no means a perfect person. So these are the things that I try to guide myself with, what are my values, right? Because it's who you are. I think that, right, is what builds your brand, and actually fundamentally, authentically being who you are everywhere you go, and not as a scheme to promote. Like, you got to be the real deal everywhere, right? And then I'd say finding really good mentors, and they don't have to be just mentors in the sales space. Like, I have my mentor is our chief design officer, Justin McGuire. He's amazing. I intentionally work with him because he's not in sales, but I admire his brand and his leadership of a team of 300 people. And I want to learn from that and how he does that. So I'd say being intentional about having mentors, and also, success obviously as an individual contributor matters, so that you can then lead with that success. I think a lot of, for me, has been about like, how do
you choose someone, not the person, right? But you go in and you say, gosh, I want to talk to somebody, someone to mentor me. And I think in sales, we get so narrow-minded, right? That it's all got to be about sales. What am I trying to learn from? So you walk up to this person and say, hey, could you mentor me? They might turn around and say, yeah, what do you want to know? and maybe you don't want to know. Maybe you don't know what you want to know. How do you
navigate that?
What are you looking for in someone outside of your own world?
So for me in selecting, when I selected someone who was not in a sales position, it was because I knew he led a large organization. I knew he had a fantastic reputation. He was well connected across the organization. And all of those things matter when you want to advance your career. And so, and having the sales completely taken out of it, because I've got sales mentors and people who I've worked for, who I stay in touch with, who I can go to for advice. I wanted a totally different perspective, but I think you're right. You need to have some sense of what is it that you struggle with or that you want to grow to help guide why you're asking someone. I feel like you're on mute again. I feel like I failed that interview question, but.
No, you did great. You did great. Richard failed. Like, I just answered that quiz where I'm 99.1%, worse than everybody else, right? I won.
Marin, this has been super fun and informative, and I think needed, necessary conversation. We want to thank Salesforce Revenue Cloud, Vidyard, Lead 411, as well as Wingman. And we usually end every single show with an offer of how can we help you? Anything that you want to talk about, any questions that you have. So I want to kind of turn it over to you and see if we can be helpful.
I mean, you guys are being helpful right now, honestly. I'm just so excited to be able to share the story of what we're doing. It's so fresh and new. I'm like I've never started an affinity group. So thank you for giving us a platform to talk about why it matters. I really deeply hope that people hear this and go, you know what? I want to form a community like that, even as an ally, even as, but especially someone sober. I think that matters, right? Or whatever your own story is, right? Like honestly, that you guys are helping just by putting this out into the world. And I hope it inspires people to bring their authentic selves to work, because I think we're just far better humans when we get to be humans together all day, not just after hours, like during the workday too.
Assuming, I'm sure the whole company will listen to it, but if you're at Salesforce, where do you go to find out more about Soberforce? If you are one of those
you just
employees?
Simply search in our org 62, which is our instance of Salesforce, for Soberforce, and you will find our very public chatter page. And all of our phone numbers of the co-founders are listed on the right-hand side with their names, as well as other resources from our employee success and the great benefits that we offer. So we have all of those links as well.
Fantastic.
Glad to know you. And
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story. Like, it's been really educational and inspiring.
Well, thank you, Richard and
so
Scott.
much.
It was so lovely to meet you both. And I really appreciate you making time to hear the story of Soberforce.
Thanks again.